Hello everybody, Hexagön here, and welcome back to the second episode of Balmaine, the London-inspired City Skylines series that I'm currently working on. So, last episode we worked on a hipster gentrified canal area, and a tube station that's elevated, and today we're mostly going to be working on a wealthy Georgian and Victorian neighbourhood, which will mostly be made up of these houses that I'm putting down here. Now, there are going to be some new Georgian buildings, I believe, coming up on the workshop soon by Rick400, which will be really great because I've seen some of the previews of the assets and they look really good. However, the ones I'm using right now are a bit less flexible. They're a bit lower quality because the assets are older. So I'm gonna make this now, but when the new Georgian assets do come out, I will probably be making another episode with another neighbourhood, but I'm gonna keep this one. So in addition to the housing area we make around here, which is a very nice, leafy, affluent area, although contrasted a bit to what we did yesterday, which is more of a bit of a shabby chic hipster area. In the future episode, also next to this neighbourhood, we're going to be doing a rougher area. This is all inspired by the de Beauvoir town, which is an area in London which is very eclectic in styles and in the neighbourhoods that it's around. There's big diversity around here, not just ethnic diversity, but income diversity, diversity of architecture styles, etc., that we touched on in the last episode. So we're going to be capturing that in the next few episodes. Here I do continue with the canal theme. Up here there is a canal basin, which I wanted to include because the canal from the last episode was quite narrow, so I'm going to do a bit of a larger basin, which allows me to have a few more docking areas for boats, and in the end it turned out quite nicely. What I'm using that I didn't use in the last episode for the canals is I decided, because the water physics in this game were driving me absolutely mad, I decided to use, you won't see it here because I changed it later, but I used some fake water props that are surface props and look like water, but they don't move. So even though in the cinematics you don't see the water moving, in the end I think it's better because the water in canals doesn't move a whole lot anyway, and in terms of just flexibility, being able to hold a whole network without flooding the city, and just time consuming and all that, I think the water surface props are super flexible and just really work for what I'm going through here. So I'm putting down a few Victorian houses along it, a mix of a few warehouses and a few different houses, restaurants, cafes, etc., a bit like last episode, but this area would be a bit quieter, whereas the other one would be a bit more vibrant and active. There's a bit of a different vibe going on with this canal basin. I did want to put down some barges, but I could not find any on the workshop, so some of the boats are a bit smaller. So yeah, this area would have probably been slightly gentrified, maybe in the 1990s or even the 1980s, a bit like some of the areas around the Camden Lock or around Islington, which I'm mostly basing this one on. So some of the apartments I just put down there kind of fit a kind of slightly Dutch, a Dutch feel, which I was also trying to go for here. And then of course there's a few remnants from an industrial past as well. So what I wanted to talk about in this video was also the reaction to the last video, which is important because if I want to keep going on this series I need to do the type of things that the viewers want, and I'm happy to say that the previous video got a pretty decent reception actually. So I'm going to be reading some comments and questions and answering them in this part. So the first comment is from Cheeseime, and he said, "The quality here is superb, and it's really great to see some more UK themed series, especially something pretty local to me like this. Like to see some of the less pretty parts of London represented, proper grimy with dodgy high streets and council flats galore." So first of all, thanks a lot for the comment, Shizime. I've seen some of your work on Twitter and on Reddit, and it's really amazing some of the stuff that you've put together, UK themed, or some of the new Mediterranean build that you're doing right now. So definitely keep up the good work there. As for the suggestion on the rougher parts of London, definitely want to add some of them, and I've been looking for some decent assets on the workshop to be able to do that, because it's definitely important to incorporate all the different parts of London, and I'm thinking of definitely doing something like that soon, perhaps based on the Grenfell, the estate that Grenfell Tower is in, and also touch upon the whole story of Grenfell, which would be very interesting to do. Try not to get into the whole politics, but I think it's important to mention it because obviously it was a very big deal for London and for the rest of the United Kingdom when it happened, and it did bring up a lot of questions about housing, about quality of life in the city, and about the way city and the councils treat the less fortunate citizens, and especially black and minority ethnic groups across the country, which is very pertinent at the moment with the whole Black Lives Matter protests going across the world. I'm not going to be getting fully into the whole Black Lives Matter debate, but I would say that it is important to inform yourself with reliable sources about this, and if you want to hear people talking about Black Lives Matter in the context of City Skylines, then definitely check out some YouTubers like Prez, who had a lengthy discussion about the whole topic in one of his latest Columbia City episodes. So if you're interested, then definitely check him out for that video. So yeah, the next comment is from Chelsea Fan 91, and they asked, "Nice one. I think we'll do something inspired by West London." Well, as I said, I'm going to be doing around the Lancaster West Estate, close to White City for the Grenfell episode, but I probably will also do something inspired by Kew Gardens, maybe combine a sort of Kew Gardens themed episode with a Hyde Park or something. I'll see how I can merge it, because obviously the London inspired city I built will not be anywhere near to the real size of London. So for example, when I do a big park, instead of doing 2 large parks, or the dozens of large parks that London has, only maybe be able to do 1 or 2, because otherwise the size of the parks would just completely overwhelm the city in the map, which isn't that big. So yeah, there will be West London inspired things. There'll also probably be, maybe in the same Grenfell episode, I'll do a part of an elevated highway like the Westway, because that'll be fairly interesting to do. So yeah, you can definitely expect some West London builds. Next comment is from Jackwell. Now that we can't go out, can't wait for this series to develop so I can visit it virtually. I'm living in the UK, by the way. Nice to see some more UK themed builds for my eye candy. Thanks a lot, Jackwell. Definitely City Skylines is quite fun at the moment, since we don't have that much to do and going outside, although some countries, like where I'm living, we are going into deconfinement. However, a lot of people still have to stay inside their houses, and to be able to visit places virtually with Google Earth, City Skylines, and also I see a lot of tourist boards for different countries are doing kind of virtual 360 things for museums and famous landmarks. So yeah, the next comment is from Lawpire, who says, "Great content, lad. Looking forward. Does it mean the end for Project Brussels?" So Project Brussels is kind of off the cards for the moment, because the save game got a bit broken, and since then there's been some issues with mods, and also so the save game is difficult to get to work, and then I kind of lost motivation a bit for it, just because building a real life city means that there's a lot of things that you can't do, and there's a lot of things you have to sacrifice in order to get it to work. It's very time consuming, and sometimes you just want to do something by yourself and not just copy everything that's there, like in a 1:1 scale. So, which is fun to some extent, but I think I prefer the current setup with London, which means that I create a city that's very like London, but also you can also tell that it might not be London. So it's inspired, but it's not exactly the same thing, and it's definitely not a 1:1 version, which would be completely impossible. But another issue with the Brussels project was that there was a big lack of the right assets that I needed for the city centre, which of course is the main part of Brussels that people know, and it was just about possible to do suburbs, but to do the city centre was very difficult. There were a few good assets that I could use, especially for some of the iconic landmarks like the Grand Place, which would have been impossible to do just because it's such a unique square. But yeah, I'm hoping for when I do central London and some of the big landmarks, it'll be a lot easier. And I've seen some ideas and some more assets that'll definitely be able to get something close to the real thing, and I'm looking forward. So yeah. Next comment, Ian Jones says, nice to see a UK build. Have you considered the UK road project and the network rivers? I'm Mac Welshman, so this could be blind self-promotion. Well, thanks Mac Welshman. I am using quite a lot of your assets, which are really good. I'm using the UK road project for the roads, but I have not subscribed to the prop pack, which may be why you didn't recognize them at first. That's just so I can go and be a bit more flexible with adding my own props, and also because I just don't have enough space to add more and more mods. I'm already at the complete limit, so I'm just trying to get rid of anything that isn't completely necessary for the build, even though I still have quite a lot of stuff that I need to cut down on. So yeah. Next comment from Tommy C86. Hope you keep going with this. Can I ask how you got your toolbar to look like that? Well, thank you. It is a nice toolbar. It's from a mod you can get on the workshop. I forget the name right now, but I'll make sure to post a link in the description or a comment on this video. It changes the way that the toolbar at the bottom of the screen looks like, and gives you a bunch of information about what's going on in the city without having to go into the menu options. Plus it just looks nicer, so that's why I have it. So another comment is from Ishnotfish06. You can use Paris assets for your central London inspired build. They really do fit in well, just darken them a bit and hey presto. You could also put shops on ground floors too. Yeah, that is something I have been thinking of doing. Not all the Paris assets will exactly fit the theme, but quite a few I can use, and I can use all the modular shop packs with different shops for the bottom. So yeah, I think that'll work nicely. Nice suggestion. So yeah, now what I'm doing is I'm just detailing a bit of the canal area with flags, tables, chairs, and then decals, which just adds a bit of life and character to the area. And soon I'm going to move on to the rest and finish up the Georgian housing area, and detail some of the squares that are there, and also finishing up the back gardens for these houses, which takes quite a bit of time, but in the end it's kind of worth it, I think, because it just adds some realism to the city. The next comment is from Hannah Hegg. Also make a tram system like the Croydon trams in the south of London. Would be fun and look nice with the London-inspired city. Trams would be maybe a bit harder to do because Since they're not so important in most of London, I decided not to download that many tram assets to make them look nice, just to save space on the computer and be able to focus on, for example, the railway lines and the tube lines. Maybe if I manage to make enough space and save enough RAM, then I might download some tram assets and put in the Croydon tram link. But for now, I'm probably going to focus on more heavy rail and buses and that kind of transport, purely out of the fact that I don't want to destroy my computer. So sorry about that, but it's all I can really do at the moment. So what I'm doing here now is I'm doing some more social housing, which was built along this stretch of road probably in the post-war period. So these buildings at the time would have been a part of the Labour government solution to the housing crisis that London faced after World War II, because of the fact that so many homes had got destroyed by the German Blitz, and there was also a lot of poverty, rationing, and the government decided to go and build large-scale housing estates, like a bit like this one that are still in use today, although a lot of them have become a bit more upmarket than what they were at the time. A lot of the poorer social housing that you get today was built a bit later, whereas quite a lot of the 1950s and 1930s stuff is either social housing or has been renovated since then. So these, I imagine, because of the location, would have been probably refurbished and now are maybe normal, fairly expensive apartments, considering that almost all apartments in London are pretty expensive. Housing prices in London are just off the scale for a lot of people, but we'll talk about that in the future. So this road is a bit, the architecture and the buildings along this stretch of road is a bit different from the other side of the canal, because I imagine that since the road here would have been a fairly important artery, the canal would have been important for transporting goods, and the tube and railway line would have been also an important transit link. This would have been a good strategic place for the Germans to have bombed when they bombed London, as their intent was to cause as much chaos and bomb parts of the city that were important to it, for example, near to train stations and such. So that's why the area where there are still Georgian houses today would have been maybe less important and less strategic, so that's why they were preserved, whereas the other part wasn't. So right now I'm building a Georgian square. These are very common around these areas in London, and they're basically a kind of common garden area, as some of these houses wouldn't necessarily have had gardens, and people can come, and they're fairly small, but they're pleasant, green, leafy areas, and if you have a house that faces onto a square, it'll generally be worth quite a lot of money. So I'm putting in a small statues, some circular paths, some nice landscaping, and then trees, park benches, and all that. They're very popular in summertime when the temperature goes up above 20 degrees, and all the Londoners come out of their houses and apartments and come and enjoy the sun in these small parks. So now I'm moving on to the last part of this episode, which is the church and the churchyard cemetery. So the point of this cemetery was to be a sort of nice area around the church and the churchyard would have been fairly old. And the reason for this is that the church itself was probably built a long time ago, and the cemetery got full probably not that long after that, like a few hundred years after the church was built. And after that they did not have the space to put in more graves, and in fact a lot of the churchyards that you see around, especially central London and also around the inner suburbs of London, apart from the new churches, is that these kind of churchyards, there are hardly any graves after the Victorian era, and that's because a lot of the cemeteries got full, and the people who died after that had to be buried in large graves and cemeteries that were built in the outer suburbs and also in the countryside, which later became the outskirts of the city. And in fact, people would have to take the corpses on trains out to the suburbs at that time. So that's why I'm making it quite old, and for that reason, it's I also made it a little bit more dirtier, slightly less well kept, because there wouldn't be as many families left over caring for the graves and putting flowers. Although there probably would be perhaps a gardener or someone who goes and attends to the general upkeep of the area, but the graves themselves would be quite old and battered. So that's the kind of feeling that I try to put into the detailing here. So yeah, that brings the episode to a close right now. Make sure to stay tuned for the future episodes, and goodbye.